Hey there, extra historians. Welcome to Lies, the part of the show where we tell you all the things we left out, the stuff we got wrong, and the secrets that we conceal. I'm Rob, I'm the head writer of Extra History, and this is our Secret Society series. Lies is made possible by our patrons. Thank you so much, and thank you for choosing this series. If you would like to be a patron and shape the future of our show, you can go over to Patreon, join our Discord, and vote on topics and even suggest episode topics. We are also over on Nebula First, if you're interested in seeing our Hypatia of Alexandria series. And we, of course, have merch. I particularly like these little pins. They are amazing. Even if you're not like a pin person, I'm not really a pin person. I get crafty with them. I've recently been using them for bookmarks as part of my Midori Traveler's Notebook system. Of course, it's a Traveler's Notebook, so it has to have Ibn Battuta, right? He's the best traveler of all. Recommended reading for this week is The Real History of Secret Societies by Richard B. Spence. It's a great courses course. I would be a little careful about this one. One of the things that he likes to point out is how kind of the conspiracy milieu around secret societies is a major part of it, but as a result of that, I feel like he doesn't signpost like what is for sure fact and what is conjecture and what is conspiracy theory quite as well as you would normally expect in like a history lecture series. So I found that a little difficult to work with. So just, your mileage may vary. If you think that something in there sounds iffy, I would check out another source. The Hidden History of the Boston Tea Party by Adam Jortner, also the great courses. This was kind of interesting in the example of a revolutionary secret society. We didn't end up using it in the show because one of the things that I looked at was that the Sons of Liberty might be a one that we covered. I decided we'd wait on that one. But it does, it is quite interesting. Yates, The Man in the Masks by Richard Ellman. This is all your Yates-Crowley drama. I do want to say that the Battle of Blythe Road is not in here. That was in an article written by Richard Ellman in another publication, but this has a lot of stuff about Yates and mysticism and the Golden Dawn and his leadership there, and difficulties with Crowley, and the two hated each other. And if you want to hear all the stuff about like Crowley being sucked on by a vampire, this is where you find it. It's pretty gonzo. And then we just used a lot of academic articles on this. I wanted to keep this series particularly academic, just because there's a lot of things that you will read or hear about these that I don't trust. And there were a few times that I had to make choices and tell maybe less of a good story, but maybe more of an accurate story. Great example. Supposedly the one account has it that the Bavarian government gets the papers on the Illuminati because one of their couriers is struck by lightning. And I'm like, I don't know about that, man. You will sometimes hear that in like podcasts about the Illuminati, but I did not find that in the academic sources we consulted. So I just was I wasn't sure about that. That seemed pretty fantastical to me. But let's just jump right in. I am part of a secret society, or at least something that used to be a secret society. And if you hang in for Ibn Battuta's side trip, I will tell you which one and all about my initiation and the secrets that I was given. It involved secret handshakes. Like I said, there were a few things I left out because I was being ultra vigilant. And one thing I do want to, just mark for you is that the whole Battle of Blythe Road thing, there are multiple accounts of how this happened. I'm a little like 60-40 on whether it happened. I think something like it happened, but exactly how big a deal of it is kind of up for debate. But I couldn't not tell that story. And I feel like we made pretty clear that accounts differ on it, and you should have a little bit of skepticism about this. I did want to mention we have other shows where secret societies come up. There's a bunch in the Sun Yat-sen series. The Sons of Liberty is mentioned in History of Beer, right? I'm working on our Garibaldi series, and there's some in there. So these are things that do affect history. A lot of the ones that we showed in this series might not be the most crucial, versus something like the Revived China Society, right, and Sun Yat-sen, or the Black Dragon Society, or the Triad Societies. They tend to proliferate during revolutionary periods. So it's an interesting thing to just kind of like file in the back of your brain that you might see this again. Also, we said this in the first episode, but it bears repeating. What makes a secret society secret is not the existence of the society. It's things like the membership, the information that is being withheld, that is the quote-unquote special knowledge, which sometimes is just like the Illuminati is just stuff that people made up. A lot of people, because of the nature of this series, watched it out of order, so they didn't get that explanation in episode 1, so this kind of regularly came up. A few folks asked why we didn't do the Freemasons. It's just too big a topic. I couldn't do it in one episode. You have to go into, the legendary history of the organization versus like what is actually verified of when it might have started. Supposedly it goes back, to the building of, the temples in Jerusalem. And it's like, it really doesn't, but I did really consider doing a single episode on Freemasonry and the American Revolution. I'm especially very interested in the idea of George Washington as a Freemason because he's also the spy master, but he has this background in this organization that has these like spheres of membership and, information that is compartmentalized and in codes and things like that. So I think that's a really fertile area for a future episode, but I wanted to be able to expand it to 2 episodes if I thought there was enough. Freemasonry is very useful in revolutions because you already have these kind of like secret circles and networks that are not necessarily fully public knowledge. So it's very cool. And of course, Freemasonry was practiced on both sides of the revolutionary conflict. And you do find people who are, basically asking favors if they're prisoners of war to their Masonic brothers on the other side. Patron question from Gabriel Poole. What made the Freemasons so prone to takeover by the secret societies? I think it's just because they were really successful. It's the most well-known kind of secret society or fraternal organization that's around. It was just very prominent in the 18th century. It was pretty socially accepted. I think also like its nature where you're inducted into kind of these spheres of knowing more and more is prone to a bunch of powerful people within it just injecting their own stuff into it and saying like, this is just the next level, right? And of course, Freemasonry, again, like we couldn't do it in an episode because it breaks up. There's Scottish Rite Freemasonry. There's other variations, and it wasn't like in a solid, stable place. It was changing. It was evolving over time. Patron comment by Michael Truscott. I like this series a lot and it has taught me something. Cults may be mysterious, but it ain't that bad or scary or spooky as I thought. Yeah, that's one of the fun things about this series is digging into something like the Illuminati and you're like, oh God, these are just a bunch of nerds. Like it's a bunch of college students who being like doing college student stuff, and I always enjoy that. I love the Golden Dawn one too, because again, it has this kind of like sinister reputation. And then you start looking at it and you're like, oh, this is really goofy. Like these are some very serious, interesting people being very goofy. And I love that. I love that in history. YouTube question. I love the setup for this series. You nailed the vibes. Thank you. Allie's art and Matt's narration were pivotal to the success of that framing device. And I'm glad to occasionally do something kind of weird and different and kind of throw a curveball that'll be fun and not necessarily our usual thing. I really want like an Ordo Extra Historia mug or something like that. First episode, Cult of Mithras, patron question from Hercules. In episode 1, you mentioned the Cult of the Virgin Mary was unorthodox, divergent from Roman Catholicism. And I'll deal with that part of the question first. The Cult of the Virgin Mary isn't a deviation, but normal part of Catholic, Orthodox, and similar forms of Christian worship. that was my point, though, right? So the academic version of the word cult is a subset within a larger Orthodox belief system, right? So the cult of the Virgin isn't considered like heretical or outside. It's like something that's a little different and a little more specific, but still within the wider circle of Catholicism, right? The same way that the cult of Mithras was within what was kind of, I mean, it's much looser definition than Catholicism, right? But like within Roman religion, you do have this like cult of Mithras, or you have the cult of Isis, or whatever. These are all accepted parts of Roman religion. They're just a smaller subset that is interested in something very specific, or is like a little bit different, but is still within the wider community. And that is the academic version of the word cult, which has just become adulterated in popular culture to the point that it means like basically nothing. It gets to the point where if you talk to certain Christians, mainstream Christians, they'll say like, oh, that like a Buddhist monastery is a cult. And you're like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, wouldn't a Christian monastery then be a cult? Like, it similarly like controls your time, involves meditation, and it's just a hugely subjective term in the pop culture sense. And again, to the point, it's just something that you sling at someone else. Nobody self-identifies as being in a cult, which is why, as religious scholars do, like they tend not to use it. Yeah, it's one of those things that everyone thinks they know what it means, but when you actually start trying to nail down a definition, it becomes really messy and weird. The second part of this question is involving my characterization of the Catholic Church taking on some aspects of a secret society. This is just something I think is interesting, that there are these grades of membership where you know more based on how high you are in the church, but like in the main, I feel like it's the concept of masses being in Latin, the Bible being in Latin, people not being able to read or necessarily understand what's happening in Mass, that it's all filtered through people higher up on the chain of command, basically. I'm not saying the church is a secret society. I'm saying it's interesting that we have this kind of thing. I also think it's probably likely that groups like the Freemasons intentionally modeled themselves on kind of the Catholic Church. You especially look at something like, the Illuminati, one of the ranks is priest, right? Or the Hellfire Club in 18th century London, right? Which is, I wanted to do a Hellfire Club episode, but maybe that's a future. We have the editorial position at Extra History that 18th century London is best London. I stand 18th century London, so maybe in the future. But so that's what I'm talking about. YouTube question. I went to the London Mithraeum at the Bloomberg building. Truly a must go. Yes, I would love to go. I've never been. It's on my list now of something I will do the next time I'm in London. Episode 2, Illuminati. Patron question from Michael Truscott. How did the Illuminati members create the symbol? And anyway, they made it. It freaks me out. So the pyramid with the eye, the all-seeing eye, is not an Illuminati symbol. The Illuminati symbol is this one with the owl that we were showing, which is, reference to Athena. The symbol, the all-seeing eye, is it's a Christian Enlightenment symbol, and it's an abstract version of God, right? As God being all-powerful and all-seeing. It's used in Freemasonry. That's kind of where it comes from, but it's floating around too. So it has no connection to the Illuminati. People just find it kind of spooky, so they tack it on in the same way that the name Illuminati is kind of sinister, so it became popular. It's part of like this coalescing of a myth of the Illuminati, is that like they're so powerful, they have this symbol and it went on US money. It's like, well, there's a reason the Great Seal of the United States says, "In God we trust," and then it has this representation of God, right? It just looks kind of weird to us. Patron question from Corey. How did Weishaupt react to the early Illuminati conspiracy theories? Must have been funny to have revolutions blamed on a secret society some 5 years after it was destroyed. Yeah, I mean, he continued to write about Illuminism and Illuminist ideas, but what's funny to me is how quickly mainstream all those ideas became. Just the idea of like secular government, like that's the American Revolution. You know, like I said, Thomas Jefferson really, really liked Weishaupt writing, but he just very quickly became just something that a lot of people believed and were not controversial. Well, were controversial, but like in the United States or places that were adopting kind of democratic forms of government, this is just like normal, and this was part of normal discussions. So it's all the like sinister stuff, the like, oh, we will change society from behind the scenes, which, you know, the point of that was like, we won't have a big bloody revolution. We'll just like fix things little by little by little, right? So yeah, it's a weird period. Patron question by Joshua Kerner. I hope you discuss how often fun conspiracy theories end up being an anti-Semitic place, particularly in the context of how often Jews end up being the puppet master of puppet masters in conspiracy theories, even or especially those involving organizations like the Illuminati. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And but that's a little bit more of a modern thing. That became more, this is not to say there weren't anti-Semitic conspiracy theories before, but it became more prominent in Britain and the United States when you start having the Tsarist pogroms and you have the flight of large amounts of Eastern European Jews to Britain and the United States and that kind of thing. There are conspiracy theories definitely in Eastern Europe. But before that, it was the Catholics, especially in Britain and the United States. Like Britain had a very strained relationship with Catholicism, right? You have Henry VIII and breaking with the church, and these invasion attempts by Spain, and then like multiple wars with Catholic France, and as a result, there is this feeling that like there are like Jesuits like hiding in the woodwork, and quite literally during the Elizabethan era, this is true, right? But there is just this ongoing sense, this paranoia that like papist agents are behind everything and behind every revolutionary sign. And just like the modern conspiracy theories, it's like ridiculous. It's like it's the Jesuits who caused the French Revolution that is heavily anti-Catholic. None of it makes sense because it's all just based on anxiety and whatever is the anxiety that's being expressed at the time. And those Catholic conspiracy theories were, existed well into the 20th century. So it is both, but I think it has less to do with necessarily like the group involved and more about like anxieties surrounding like what is going on in society at that time. A YouTube question. Fun fact, there's an active Freemason building in Orange County, California. Yeah, they're everywhere. There's one in Hong Kong that I walk by every once in a while, and I just see I see the compass, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's the Freemason building. Next to the Golden Circle, YouTube comment, Southern slavery expansionism is worthy of its own series. Both William Walker's and Narciso Lopez's filibustering in Nicaragua and Cuba, respectively, had the eventual goal of being annexed by the U.S. as slave states, a la the Texas Revolution. Again, it's important to remember that like this had worked with Texas essentially. It's obviously it's a different context, but the practical effect is the same. Is like this very large slave state was added to the United States. Lopez asked both Jefferson Davis and Robert E. Lee to lead expeditions to overthrow the Spanish government in Cuba. They declined it, but it didn't stop them from trying to do the same thing later on with their own government. Yeah, also I just want to mention that it didn't happen with the intention of spreading slavery, but like my home state of Hawaii was specifically overthrown by American citizens and a rogue diplomat with the intention of handing it to the United States. We talked about that in the Path to Pearl Harbor series. So even after the Civil War, this is not something that stopped, right? No mention of John Wilkes Booth belonging to the Knights of the Golden Circle. No, because there's no actual evidence he was a member. This comes up a lot. Also, Jesse James There's no documentation of either being Knights of the Golden Circle. Jesse James in particular seems quite young. Like this is before the Civil War, and he's like a teenager during the Civil War. It's not a. I think that is highly unlikely. Booth was part of the Know Nothing Party, though. I would love to do a series on Booth. He's a fascinating character, and obviously a terrible person, but like just a really interesting window on that period in time. Episode 4, Golden Dawn. I would like to be applauded personally for not using the line that Yates yeeted him down the stairs. That might appear on a mug at some point, but it was a huge sacrifice on my part, foregoing that wordplay. As I mentioned before, there are different versions of the story. I don't think Crowley was actually planning to stab anyone with the dagger. A lot of times in this type of symbolic magic, daggers are used for ritual purposes. I think that was his intention. I think they would have called the police for sure and probably gotten him arrested if he was actually trying to stab someone with it. And just a lot of this, anytime you read about Golden Dawn stuff, it's very contradictory, like the information that you come across. It's partially just the nature of it, like everyone telling their own story, and like all these people are storytellers. We're talking about Yates, we're talking about Crowley, we're talking about Florence Farr. These are all people who are very good storytellers that would be good about spinning things one way or the other. And I also want to say that all this drama with McGregor is really simplified. It's really bonkers. I highly recommend that Yates biography, or even just some of the articles that are below. They're pretty goofy. Finally, the Yakuza, Patriot Western from Jacob White. I'm not sure the Yakuza are a secret society, considering a civil war is what killed the Yakuza, a war that brought even the US government into it. This was the Yamaichi War of 1985 to 1989. Well, I'd go back to what I said before about secret societies having their deliberations and membership be secret, not necessarily their existence. But also, this is why we focused on the formation of the Yakuza, because, as I'll talk about later, I think a lot of secret societies have become less secret over time, and particularly in the modern era, just because of the age we live in. A lot of people were amazed at the idea of this big 18-inch pipe being used to bludgeon someone. That was the point. People would have these big, heavy metal pipes so that they could use them as a weapon, but it wouldn't be confiscated as a weapon if you were walking around with it. I wanted to include that detail because it's one of those things of like, if you know, then you see that and you go, uh-oh, something bad's going to happen. A lot of people said that they understood Ochikabu for the first time in the video, even though they played it in Yakuza 0. I have not played those games. I hear they're fantastic, though. Someone said, you said less than 12,000 members in the narration, but the symbol is a greater than rather than a less than. You've discovered a deeper level of secrecy by noticing this error. I would like to see you after the video. We had a great comment. There were a bunch like this. Shortly after the Henshin earthquake that devastated the city of Kobe in the mid-90s, I was visiting Osaka and took up a part-time job during the summer at a labor dispatch office. It was run by the Yakuza. The boss was a typical 80s to 90s Yakuza with the shades, suit, clan pin badge, shiny shoes, and a Mercedes-Benz. The Yakuza has used fronts like this to support earthquake relief efforts. They did so during like the 2011 earthquake. This is fairly well known. I would say, though, that this is not unusual for organized crime, right? You go to Medellin, and Pablo Escobar is very popular, right? He provided employment and money and infrastructure and like all this stuff. You look at Italian American mafia organizations, and they would do a lot of like community-oriented stuff. This is partially because they were originally like community organizations, right? Like kind of mutual aid society-ish, in that like, you're poor Italian or Jewish immigrants in New York and someone robs your store, the police are probably not going to come and help you out that well. So there are organizations that step in and fill that role that might be criminal organizations. But then there's also like this sort of public service aspect, which, while it might on the surface seem like, oh, we're doing good stuff for the community, that's also buying you a certain amount of allies in the community, right? So if you have done earthquake relief, if you are going and dropping off money to, a woman whose husband has died on the job, or something like that, those people probably aren't going to rat you out to the police if they see something that you're doing that is less than legal, right? So this is a feature, not a bug. It's very smart politics. Coming up on Extra History, Hypatia of Alexandria, martyr for knowledge. This is going to, I think, surprise a lot of people. If you think you know the story of Hypatia, the mathematician of the late Roman Empire, mathematician, philosopher, astronomer, and astrologer, who is torn apart by a crowd of monks. There's a lot more to the story, and even if you know that story, there's a lot more to the mythology that continues on into the 18th and 19th centuries. Then Invasion of Canada, Battle of Quebec. This is going to be so neat. So this is also like the origin story to a certain extent of Benedict Arnold and Aaron Burr. And we will follow that with a two-part on Benedict Arnold and treason. So we're going to start with the invasion of Quebec for 4 episodes, and then 2 episodes we'll do the rest of Benedict Arnold's life. I'm now writing Garibaldi unifying Italy. I wish I had known more about Garibaldi earlier. He's a really interesting and exciting historical figure, as well as his wife Anita, who's, they're go off fighting guerrilla wars in South America, in Brazil and Uruguay before they go back to Italy, and very much both of them being on the front lines. And right now I'm getting together topics for Magic, the Occult, and Spooky Vibes. This is going to be our Halloween series, and we're going to do a full Halloween series this time. And I'm looking at the suggestions for that. There are some great ones. Ibn Battuta side trip. I am part of a secret society. Which one is it? Well, there's an honor society in the US called Phi Beta Kappa. I did well enough in college that I was invited to join by I think a history professor. They don't tell you who recommended you. And this used to be a secret society. Back in Revolutionary War, it started as a discussion group for things like democracy and secular government and all these Enlightenment things that were not safe to discuss openly. And, when the revolution happened and then this wasn't a big thing, it just sort of became an honor society. So I went. I said yes. A friend of mine had joined, and he suggested I just say yes because it's a good thing to have on your resume. I went through. There was kind of like an initiation ceremony. It was more like a graduation kind of ceremony. And they give you this. What's funny is it technically still has aspects of secret society, but they're like wink, wink, like this is for fun, right? Like we were told, oh, there is a secret handshake, and if you want to know it, you can, come over and I'll show you. And I did. I learned the secret handshake and I immediately forgot it because I can't do sequences that well. Like I can't do combination locks or like handshakes or algebra or anything like that. So then there's this package of documents they give you and they're like, don't show this to anyone. But it's kind of like, and I accidentally left it in my friend's dorm room after. He was also a member though, so he gave it back to me. But what's funny about it is there is a secret society aspect for it, but it's for fun. It is very specifically this isn't really a secret society, but it's sort of fun for it to be a little bit of a secret society, right? It's not something I think about all the time. I've never been to a meeting or anything. It made my grandmother very happy that I got into it, and that was kind of the end of it. But I think that's how a lot of secret societies have gone. You can't really have a secret society in the age of the internet, right? If I want to Google rituals for Freemasonry, I'm going to get them, right? It's just not the same. It's not to say that there's no role for them, but I just think that it's things are different now, and the secret societies that are secret are either, the kind of revolutionary societies that are discussing things that we would find not okay, or are kind of these more fraternal organizations that are just for fun, but they want to have this other layer to them, or it's important, for example, the Shriners to give money anonymously. So that's, I think, where things have been going. Hard to have a secret society these days, in the days of cell phones. All right, thank you very much. I'll see you next time for Hypatia of Alexandria.
Say, did you hear the one about Kuya Koi, Joseph Blame, Izzy Coin, Ilkner, Dominic Valenciana, Arclight Games, Angelo Valenciana, and Ahmed Ziad Turk being legendary patrons? Yeah, turns out they're the best.